Tupperwares before I find the one that's the right size. So now I just ask him, will it fit in here? And I have terrible geographic learning disability. I'm just barely able to read a map. You know? And will I get better at it? I'm going to keep practicing it, but it's never going to be my strong suit. So we all have different ways of learning. Certainly children with social development issues, with emotional regulation issues. Here's a little girl who has quite a serious emotional regulation issue. Is she the most beautiful thing in the world? There's a picture of her at the end of this that is just going to melt your heart. She's taken a piece of St. Augustine grass and put it around her head like a crown. And she's just knockout gorgeous. And she has a really difficult time taking direction from another person. And even when you have built a relationship with Brooke, she still will have days where she comes in and she will refuse to do anything, and she'll be disruptive in the classroom, where we have to remove her from the classroom so the other children can learn. Those emotional meltdowns are getting much fewer than they used to be, but Brooke really struggles to be socially coordinated and emotionally regulated. She really gets flooded with her own emotions. So what we've discovered about the children who've been to Monarch, and at this point there have been about 200 children who have come to Monarch. We currently have 85, so about 130, it's a little bit more than 200, so about 130 have moved on. They've gone to public schools and private schools, elementary, middle school, high schools. We've had 24 graduates, and of those 24 high school graduates, 14 have gone on to college. Another handful have gone to technical schools or community schools, community colleges, and several are out in the workplace. So we're very, very proud of how our kids have done in the long term. Another thing that we're discovering, we're beginning to do some longitudinal research. We have one of our program directors who's working on a doctoral dissertation, which is going to be following up all of our children that we can find. And but we're getting anecdotal information that's really heartwarming. For example, in our high school, some of our children take what's called virtual high school courses. They're done through the internet, and there are 400 different, especially higher level courses that you can take. So like, if you have two children that want to take physics, they might be able to take it through the virtual high school. And in order to participate in the virtual high school, you have to provide a teacher that teaches a course too. So one of our teachers is teaching a Shakespeare course to other high schoolers around the United States, maybe the world. But we've participated in that for about 3 years now. And the people who are running the virtual high school said to us last summer, you know, it's an interesting thing about Monarch kids. When they first sign up for the courses, and these are hard courses, this is not watered down material by any means. Some of them are accelerated courses in high school. When they first start with us, they're as likely as all the other kids, maybe more likely, to have a period where they just crash, where they fail a test, or they don't turn in 5 homework assignments, and it looks like they just might not make it. But what they're noticing about our kids is that they're resilient and that they overcome those crashes. It's like they have to learn, gee, what's the structure here? How do I succeed? It's a new environment. They have to kind of test it out, and there's a lot more independent work. But if they fail, they come right back up, and they end the courses almost always with A's and B's. So we're so excited about seeing that the resilience is there. Again, it's not that all of our kids aren't going to have some failures as they practice out in the world, in school and in life. But what you want is for them to have the wisdom, right, to be able to overcome those challenges, to continue trying, and to know that they can do it. So in other schools, most of our kids were surviving. And we know that these are kids that have incredible ability, and they need to be thriving. They need to be loving school.
So for the most part, they are intelligent children, and we want them to be able to show that intelligence. But we know that the development of the EF skills is really, really important. So important that we have one class a day in our shelter program. It is called EF. They go to that class 1 hour every day, and in that class, they remember why they're at Monarch. Why am I here? What are the objectives I'm working on? They have one objective that they have chosen with their coach and with their parents' input in each of the 4 core goal areas. And they move to their classes with a binder that contains tracking sheets. And at the end of every single class period, they rate themselves on how they've done on those objectives. And their teacher rates them. When they come back to EF the next day, they put those ratings on an Excel spreadsheet. And on Friday, they turn that Excel spreadsheet into a graph. It's right there in black and white in a beautiful graph that they can see how they did on each objective, how their teachers rated them on each objective. So mastery of an objective, getting ready to choose another objective, is very objective. It's not subjective at all. The information is right there. And they love being able to see that so clearly. We have a lot of fun. We take a lot of field trips. This was at a museum. Of course, we had to do the O. That's our Matt down here in the corner. Matt, he's the one I was telling you came from Canada. And Matt was also an exceptionally bright young man who had never had a friend. And he was hungry for friendships. He's doing very well with that. This is Brooke. Have you ever seen an angel any more beautiful? When we started with children pre-kindergarten through 7th grade, and then we added a grade each year. So as you can see, in the first few years of the school, we didn't have high school graduates. We only had high school graduates in the last 4 years. And now, besides 12th grade, we have a postgraduate program for some young men and women who need like a bridge to the workplace. So we have corporations and businesses that we're working with who will take our students, our postgraduate students, as interns. And we work very closely with them as job coaches to help them be successful in the workplace. Classes are very small. Our ratio is about 2.5 students to every 1 faculty person. And again, working both with teachers and psychology staff. In terms of diagnoses, certainly we have, we saw in the film about 1/3 of our children fall in the autism spectrum disorder. A lot of kids with ADD, about 70%, and those aren't kids we've diagnosed. These are children who come to us with a diagnosis of ADD or ADHD. Tourette syndrome. Now, I think in the last 4 or 5 years, we've been seeing more children with bipolar disorder and other mood disorders, anxiety disorders. We're getting a lot of referrals from the Menninger Clinic and places that have inpatient care that are then looking for a next therapeutic place for a child to be, and we're loving that partnership. Menninger Clinic moved from Kansas a few years ago to Houston, so they're the oldest psychiatric facility in the United States. So we're looking for that strong academic program and remediation where it's necessary, gifted and accelerated opportunities where that's critical, and then also looking to capture something that the child's passionate about, some affinity, as Dr. Levine would describe, that really turns them on and lights them up, because so many times they are pretty turned off about school and about learning, and they don't feel a lot of confidence. So if you can hook them, as Deborah said on the film, if you can hook them with something that's really interesting to them, then they can really begin to start a whole new cycle of making learning fun again. This was Jacob as he participated in a class that was a combination of language arts and social studies. And so each child got to create their own universe. And it had its own people, its own language, its own geography, its own culture.
And then after each student created that, those cultures began to interact. So some kids had created cultures that were pacifists, and other kids had created cultures where they were warriors. And it was a great opportunity for a lot of interaction. I think that's kind of what we've said before. This is Jacob at a conference that we had, where we had a speaker, and our learning center had a booth set up. And Jacob was an intern in the learning center. He was helping with creating DVDs and PowerPoint presentations. And so we always have kids, as much as we can at any event, have the kids there as greeters, have the kids there to answer questions, so that they can really have, people can have an opportunity to see how great and wonderful our kids are. And Jacob charmed the pants off of everybody that walked up to that booth. He would say, well, welcome to the Learning Center booth. Let me show you just a little bit of what we do here. And he was marvelous. So as our children come to us, we want to really be careful not to demonize other settings or in any way to not acknowledge the hard work that's gone into these kids. It is not that they have been in schools that haven't been good schools or that haven't had very, very good people in them with great intentions. What is the case, however, is that their needs have been different than the schools and the people who are in those schools have been trained to manage. And so we really want to make sure we have those good connections. And so every student and every family comes to Monarch with their own gifts. Everyone has gifts that we invite them to share with their own needs, with their own difficulties and their obstacles, and we want to really know each family individually. This was a great bowling excursion. Kids love to bowl. That's Matt. So we know that learning has to be learning-centered. We've taken as kind of our Bible, the American Psychological Association worked with some educators about 5 years, no more than that, probably about 7 or 8 years ago now, and came up with 14 learning-centered principles that are just a great, great way to design any educational program. They just help you focus on how children learn. And actually, that's the name of the book that they wrote, How Children Learn. This was part of Matt and, well, you're going to get to see a great picture in a minute of Matt and Jake, who were in this combined social studies language arts class together. And here they are. They both never had a friend. They both wanted a friend. This was the culture that Matt created, and then of course he put his face in the slide. So we're really focusing on these 3 critical areas all the time, and all the time using the research. You know, as an educator, I am embarrassed at how poorly we use research. It's not that there's not good research out there, it's that it takes a very long time to get it into schools. And we really want to stay current with the research and be using research-based practices. There's Jake in the middle. And then our second premise is that growth is taking place holistically and also within a developmental context, so that our 400 objectives that you saw that go through our 4 core goals are sequential and they're developmental. And we want to always be respectful to be developmentally appropriate, no matter what the age of the child. Our level system actually has 6 levels. The 4 that we're currently using the most are Novice and Apprentice, and Challenger and Voyager. And each one has its own unique set of learning and its own unique premises that we can't go into tonight, but if you're interested, I can give you lots of information about that. There's Matt with our music therapist on a fun day. This was actually, I think Alessandra got this off of our website a while ago, because this is part of what we were visioning, that we would have our apprentice program in 4 self-contained classrooms, and there is a beautiful outdoor classroom. And at the Challenger and Voyager level, it becomes much more complex. So we're not in individual self-contained classrooms anymore. There's a lot of openness. There's a lot of intentional interaction, social interaction, where kids literally run into each other a lot, all during the day, to give them those practices that they've missed. We talked about the 4 core goals and the pivotal objectives that each child chooses from those. There's our group. Choose new objectives as objectives are chosen. And then the roles change. The role of a teacher in our apprentice program is very different than the role of a teacher in our Challenger program. We want the teacher in the Challenger program to withdraw and not to be the center of the universe and not to be the one to whom all the interaction is directed, as is more typical in a self-contained classroom, so that that interaction becomes much more peer-centered. This is Kate, and Kate has one of the most beautiful stories I could possibly tell you. Kate may be the single most powerful success that I've had the privilege to be part of in almost 40 years of education. When Kate was born, she was born premature, and she had a lot of learning disabilities from the beginning. Lots and lots of speech difficulties. She was almost mute when she came to us at age 14. And she had a few kind of rote things that she would say, like she'd tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hi, it's a nice day today, isn't it? Hi, it's a nice day today, isn't it?" Never had a behavior problem in the world. She was as compliant as she possibly could be. She just had such a difficult time learning and communicating. But she was hungry to have relationships. You could tell. Because she kept saying the same rote things over and over and over, she was reaching out to try to communicate, but she didn't have the language to really be able to do it. Well, we happened to have a very talented art teacher who had Kate in a class with 3 other children, a small class of 4 children, and she played with them. Instead of putting out the materials and saying our art project for today is, she played with them. So she spent about 3 or 4 months just developing relationships. And these were all children who had a lot of problems with social interactions. And they would chase each other under the table, and they'd wear masks, and they'd just do all kinds of fun things so that the art began to be associated with fun and with a place you could go where you could be yourself. So, and then she began to put lots of different art mediums out for the children to use. And one day she gave Kate a big, huge piece of black paper and some oil pastels. Those, not crayons, they're oil pastels, and they go on just so smoothly. And Kate loved them. And so for about 3 weeks, she worked on this one oil pastel on this big piece of black paper. Soon you couldn't see any black. And she was arranging, the teacher noticed that she was putting the color on the paper in a really beautiful form. It was like an intuitive music with the color that she had. And she'd get this gorgeous thing, and then she just kept layering colors on top of it. And the art teacher had to bite her tongue not to say, "Stop, that's beautiful, don't do it anymore." But she just let her play with it. And finally, after about 3 weeks, Kate pushed her chair back to the table and she said, "I'm done." And she said, "Well, that's lovely." And she put it up. She said, "Would you like to try something else?" And she said, "No, I want another." And so for about 6 months, Kate produced these big, beautiful pieces. And one day the art teacher took a book of contemporary art in and was showing it to Kate. And as they went through the artists, Kate seemed to be not paying much attention. And then they came to one particular artist, and her eyes lit up, and she said, "He talks like me." And he did indeed. The art teacher took her work and entered it into a juried adult competition all over the city of Houston, and Kate won. And she had a 1-month, one-woman show
at one of the best art museums in Houston last April. She stood at the door, all in black like Alessandra, our performing artist, and she greeted people, and she talked to people, and she went around and looked at her artwork with people, because what happened with her art was she began to feel a sense of importance. Other children were talking to her about, "Kate, you did that, that's beautiful." People were talking to her, and her brain began talking in a different way to itself across the hemispheres, and her language has exploded. Today, Kate's in our postgraduate program. She has her own business in our program. She sells her artwork. The night of her exhibition, she sold 12 of her 15 paintings for $1,200 each. I have a Kate Mathisen. It's a print. I cannot afford an original. And it's just so inspiring, you know. Her parents thought that they were going to have a young woman whom they would be taking care of all her life. And now we're getting ready to help her move into a house with 2 other girls where they will have some assisted living, but mainly they'll be living in their home themselves. Part of her work at Monarch this year will be with the other 2 girls to make the move to the house. So rather than having the parents go and move all their stuff in and put the pictures on, that's their job. That will be part of their work. So Kate's story has just the most incredible ending. I have a few slides, but they're not our best slides of some of her work. We don't have quite enough distance. And she has some that are much better since that time. But she's a great kid. So we know everybody's got their own unique way to learn. We know how to develop a neurodevelopmental profile for each child so that we can really attend to and match their needs with our abilities. We want to make sure that we're looking at the child's strengths as well as their weaknesses. I think one of the things we do wrong in special education is we pay so much attention to boosting the weak areas that we really don't give enough attention to the strengths that each child comes with. And we want to make sure we do both. So our kids have been marginalized. They've been dislocated. Some of them have never really attached to a learning community. Some of them have been attached and then have gotten pushed away. So because of that, they've really missed all those practices. They don't know how to function in the rapid, complex world that we have today. And so we've got to provide those. We have to create a school environment that's so much more than academics, that gives them those opportunities to make up for what they've missed. And that means they've got to be coached daily. They have to have a lot of guided practice. You can't just turn them loose. And we've got to be really smart about how we do it. So that's a little bit about Monarch. This is Dr. Neal, who's one of the greatest educators in all the world. He happens to be one of our program directors. He and Deborah Hall are a large reason that Monarch's so successful. This is Jake. This was at a Halloween party. So a little bit about coaching. What I want to do is talk to you just briefly about how important the psychological piece is. If we're just having teachers, then we haven't created something different. And we've got to have teachers and psychologists that work together. There's our beautiful Brooke with her St. Augustine grass. This is some of the work of the psychologists. But this is what it's about. This is Matt and Jake working together. Both boys who never had a friend and didn't have a chance of having a friend, sharing one set of happiness, working on a presentation that they did jointly on the computer. And all I can say is, it doesn't get any better than that. In this world, and in our life, and what we have a chance to do, this is what it's about. Well, thank you very much.
Bueno, yo creo que todos nos preguntamos, el reto más grande podamos aplicar a Guatemala. Porque yo creo que sabemos que la necesidad está. Ustedes como profesionales la han vivido, nosotros como padres de familia la seguimos viviendo día a día. Y eso es donde ustedes entran también a jugar un papel muy importante para nosotros en este punto del proyecto. Quiero compartirles lo que sí ya sabemos, que sí ya tenemos, para que esto sea una realidad en Guatemala. Y nuestros principios guía para continuar con este proyecto en Guatemala, como primero será proveer un ambiente que optimice el desarrollo cognitivo y socioemocional de nuestros estudiantes, asegurar la calidad de la educación, iniciando de manera pequeña y avanzando lentamente, tener una política de admisión enfocada para asegurar el beneficio de los niños, esfuerzo en conjunto con la comunidad de padres y profesionales. Vamos a iniciar en agosto de los padres. La verdad es que a mí eso me conmueve. Con un programa bilingüe, porque sabemos que la realidad para nosotros en Guatemala es que muchos de nuestros niños sí pueden y necesitan un programa bilingüe. Y yo quiero contarles personalmente nuestra experiencia para nuestros dos hijos. Nuestro hijo mayor, su pieza fuerte es la pieza verbal. Él necesita un programa bilingüe, es ahí donde él va a florecer. Pero nuestro hijo menor tiene dificultades en la parte del ala y sabemos que por un principio no vamos a poder manejar un programa bilingüe para él. Pero como sabemos que nuestro colegio va a continuar con el modelo de MONARCH enfocado en la individualidad de cada niño, entonces es ahí donde entramos a poder manejar un programa bilingüe según lo que cada niño va necesitando. Y para esto también queremos mencionarles que estamos ya trabajando con el Ministerio de Educación porque sabemos que necesitamos la acreditación de nuestros niños. Muchos de ellos van a poder cumplir con toda la exigencia académica que el Ministerio nos va a pedir y ir pudiendo avanzar según los grados que el Ministerio nos va a otorgar. También vamos a buscar, cuando estemos listos, la acreditación americana. Y eso es algo en lo que todavía seguimos trabajando, pero inicialmente empezaremos con la acreditación de Guatemala. Y yo creo que Mari ya lo dijo muy claro, yo creo que todo esto se trata de la gente que va a trabajar dentro del modelo, de ustedes profesionales apoyándonos dentro de la comunidad y por supuesto los niños. Y yo quisiera contarles un poquito ya de quién es esta gente que ya está trabajando para nosotros para hacer este proyecto una realidad. Y yo creo que todo inició porque MONARCH nos guió hacia una persona que ha sido y ha verdaderamente sido una maestra ejemplar para ellos en el tiempo que trabajó para MONARCH. Y tuvimos la bendición, porque verdaderamente yo le llamo una bendición, que esta persona se mostró interesada en nuestro proyecto. Está ahorita sacando su doctorado en Washington y esta persona se entrevistó conmigo en Houston y mostró su interés por el proyecto y su compromiso por venir a Guatemala durante 2, máximo 3 años para poder ayudarnos a mantenernos enfocados dentro del modelo. Y será ella quien manejará nuestra coordinación académica para el colegio. Luego, tenemos aquí a la familia de Juan Pablo Melvin, quien es nuestro psicólogo, que ya está en Houston, recibirá 1 año de capacitación dentro del modelo, trabajando dentro de todo lo que es el enfoque psicológico del modelo. Empezaremos con 3 aulas. Cada aula tendrá maestro titular, maestro auxiliar. De nuestras 3 aulas ya tenemos a 2 maestros titulares también recibiendo la capacitación en Houston. Son psicólogas ambas, una graduada de la Marroquín, otra de la Nativa, con un recorrido en educación también. Y yo aquí quiero agradecer a Pati García. Sí, porque sin ti no hubiéramos podido escoger a las personas indicadas. Gracias. Pati me ayudó en el proceso de la elección de esta gente. ¿Sí? Y nuestros maestros auxiliares los entrenaremos al regreso de nuestro equipo de gente en el mes de junio, julio y agosto, que ya también hemos empezado en el proceso de reclutamiento. Nos hace falta un maestro titular, se lo voy a decir honestamente, que también tiene que recibir este entrenamiento durante este año escolar que ya empezó en principios de agosto. y seguimos en esa búsqueda y esperamos en este mes ya poder trasladar a ese último maestro que nos hace falta. Entonces tenemos en nuestro equipo a la coordinadora académica que está en constante contacto con MONARCH, siguiendo su entrenamiento para poder cumplir el papel que ella va a venir a hacer dentro del modelo, a nuestro psicólogo, a 2 maestros ya titulares y esperamos tener a nuestro tercer maestro titular ya este mes y en junio pues entonces empezar con nuestros maestros auxiliares. Cada aula va a poder manejar pues un máximo de 8 niños. Y la agrupación de los niños creo que es vital y en eso pues vamos a tener todo el apoyo constante de MONARCH durante ese proceso. Vamos a tener la visita de ellos cuando ya estemos listos para la agrupación de los niños que estén inscritos y para el proceso de admisión, un proceso que va a ser muy extenso y del cual todavía seguimos trabajando cuál es ese criterio de admisión que verdaderamente va a ser aplicable para Guatemala en un inicio. Claro, todos soñamos con llegar a ese criterio de admisión que MONARCH maneja, pero sabemos que tenemos que empezar pequeño y seguro. Y lo que ahorita sabemos es que podríamos trabajar con problemas de aprendizaje, déficit de atención, dislexia, síndrome de Tourette, Asperger y otros trastornos socioemocionales, los cuales quiero que sepan pues que ya del grupo de familias involucradas, ya solo nosotros llenamos todo ese perfil. Y el rango de edades también se los voy a dejar saber. El rango de edades está porque esos son nuestros niños. Adrián es mi niño de 6 años y el hijo mayor de una de las otras familias, que es el que es 16. Y sabemos que es un rango grande para 3 aulas y donde vamos a tener que tener pues la guía muy constante de MONARCH para hacer esa agrupación correcta para estos niños. Y pues terminando otra vez para la capacitación, las aulas multiedades, ¿verdad? Por el rango de niños que vamos a tener, pero sabiendo que no vamos a pasarnos de 3 años de diferencia en cada una de nuestras aulas. Y bueno, lo que les comentaba de la capacitación, ¿verdad? Nuestro equipo recibiendo un año escolar de capacitación en MONARCH Houston y la constante y la continua supervisión y visitas anuales del colegio, porque yo creo que todos lo sabemos, ¿verdad? O sea, si me preguntan cómo fue que esto se ha dado, yo, la verdad es que yo mismo me admito, pero definitivamente es por la pasión de un grupo de padres y familia, pero por el apoyo de ustedes que están aquí sentados, el apoyo de la gente que ya ha tenido un recorrido en este campo y que esperamos verdaderamente todos juntos podamos servir a nuestros niños. Gracias.